What is good, guys? It's Ray J back with another video, and this one I'm break down what's going on with the overall market and talk about some very important things about Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and some other important levels to watch for. I'm going to talk about the GDP numbers that just got revised and what the news is saying about the markets and how the news is going to likely affect Tesla as we're seeing the NHTSA announce more things. But before I do anything like this, before I get into any more details and give you guys a pre-market update, let me just mention a couple of things. I'm firstly not a financial planner, so take none of this as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo, the link down below, and deposit $100 into the account, you're guaranteed 5 free stocks plus a $50 cash reward. The offer ends tomorrow, so check it out before they run out. It is almost over. Anyways, now let's talk about our Tesla. How is Tesla looking? So when it comes to Tesla, this thing has a range right now from the pre-market to now. We're going to be watching this very critical support at 252.5, not to mention 250. This range of support is going to be key for it, and it needs to hold above that for it to maintain these levels. For resistance that's stopping Tesla was the zone we talked about yesterday, 257.5. Tesla's going to likely be range bound for some time before it makes another attempt to break out in the future. So it may start off kind of like dropping a little bit, could retest 255 or so, maybe a little bit lower. Then it could try to bounce, and eventually, as long as it holds this range, as long as it holds above 250 to 252.5, I could see Tesla eventually trying to retest 257.5 and breaking out to 260 plus. 265 is going to be the next important level if it breaks and holds above 260. So I do believe Tesla has more room left. It may actually cool off just a little bit, kind of like remain range bound. It could be like forming a flag right here, right? There's a very possible flag that could be forming. And if that ends up being the case, completely fine, because Tesla is just, in my opinion, going to be getting ready for the next leg higher. So it's going to be completely normal, nothing out of the ordinary whatsoever if that ends up being the case. We can actually draw out like a trend line here, for instance, just like this. This could be like our flag that's just getting ready to form. And then, if this ends up being the case, I mean, Tesla, just like many other stocks out there, still have some very bullish looking potential signals out there that suggest that the market is going to continue going higher. And I'm going to break down exactly why in just a couple of minutes. But let's first talk about the revised growth for the economy. Basically, these economists came out and they've revised the GDP growth to about 2.1% for Q2. It used to be 2.4% as the expected growth amount, but now it actually went down just a little bit, still in the positive direction. So it's not as bad, but it's just worth noting. Now, when it comes to all this data, all of this information out here is going to affect the way economists view the markets. They're still projecting that we're not in a recession just yet. So that's like a decent sign for the market. But once again, it's nothing too crazy for now. What's going to be crazier is going to be like the PCE data coming out and initial jobless claims for Thursday, not to mention the unemployment numbers coming out for Friday, which are going to be very important and have a bigger impact on the markets, in my opinion. So for now, there isn't any other big piece of data except for at 10 o'clock a.m. today, we have the pending home sales. That's all that's coming out that's like really big for data, or at least like the biggest piece of data for today that's left. And besides that, there's not much else coming out. So just be prepared for some volatility at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern time. For earnings, there's nothing really else that's too big. We just have some like AI stocks. So we have Salesforce, not to mention Dollar Tree for tomorrow. Nothing too big for now, except for like Dell going into tomorrow. Some things to remember about the market would be the fact that we're seeing tech stocks rebound. There's some Medicare negotiations going on right now for the different pharmaceutical companies. And then there is some talk about more regional bank failures, which were very possible, which is why there's been a lot of preparation from agencies to prepare for them and try to avoid them at all costs. So there's been some talk about that. We'll see if there's any new pieces of news involving that. So keep that in the back of your mind. There could always be more bank failures again, but so far there's no like new announcements about it. Now, the last thing for all Tesla investors is I'm not really seeing anything too massive in the news right now for Tesla at the time I'm recording this. However, we're starting to see some news coming out that the NHTSA has stricter requirements for autopilot, and this is continuing to affect Tesla. They're continuing to give Tesla scrutiny. And with that going on, I mean, so far Tesla has been just very resilient. They have to go on trial very soon. And we'll see what other requirements they end up seeking, because right now they're very concerned about Tesla's abilities to allow drivers to just keep their hands off the wheel, and they just have a lot of other things to talk about. But for now, we're just going to be watching this formation on Tesla. We're going to be watching if this is forming a really nice flag to potentially break out. I believe that for now it's just going to be range bound, and it may make an attempt to break out later on during the day. or it could happen like a little bit later after that. But ultimately, I think Tesla's going to break above 260. It just needs a little bit of time to get there. And we're going to be watching this breakout from this flag for the time being. It should be coming very, very soon. Now, what's good for the markets, and let me actually pull up the daily charts. So if you look at SPY, the daily candle looks bullish with the MACD right here. This looks bullish, and the same thing with Apple. Apple looks like it's leading the market upwards. Apple's leading the way up, but Apple has resistance at 185. So we're going to be watching to see if Apple could break that. So that's going to be our next level for Apple stock. If Apple breaks that and starts pushing, 186 is going to be the next level, and the market's going to push up nicely if Apple could break 185. For now, it may be range bound, may retest like the 184.2 area, maybe a little lower, kind of like trade sideways for a bit in this range right here between 184 and 185. Go back and forth for some time, then start pushing even higher later on. And if it breaks and holds 185, we're going to be watching 186 to push the markets up. So for now, I think it may be a little range bound, may trade a little sideways for some time before the market starts breaking higher. And I think that that's still very possible for today. For SPY, I think the same thing is going to be going on. We're going to start off kind of range bound in this range right here between 449 and 450. This range is still kind of tight. I would say it could actually extend to 448.5 or like closer to that. 448.5 to about 450. If we break and hold 450, we're going to be watching for a push to the 451.06 area. If it breaks below 448.5, then we're going to be watching SPY come down to 447.5. But for now, what I think is going to happen is we're just going to be range bound for some time, consolidate for a bit. In the market, I mean, it may just try to cool off the RSI just by consolidating, even dropping just a little bit back to the 448 to 449 area. Then we're going to start pushing later on, in my opinion, back to 450 plus and potentially even 451 as time goes on. We also have the gap up at 456, which I think we're eventually going to fill on SPY. The QQQ and SPY are also going to be dictated by Apple. The QQQ is kind of like in between 373.6 to 375 as the range. We're going to be watching it retest this area, and then it's eventually going to make an attempt to break 375. I think in the future it's going to break to 376.5 plus. Could happen as soon as today. It may take a little longer, but before that happens, it may be a little range bound before it tries to break out. Overall, it still looks quite good. It's holding up very, very nicely. And I think that the odds do favor the market trying to hold up around these levels before getting the next leg up. Once again, I think the bulls have the edge. If anything, Nvidia is looking relatively strong. We're going to be watching it in this range. We have resistance at 495 and support right now at 490. Also, there's going to be some support around this 487.5 area and then 480 below that. I believe Nvidia could retrace just a tiny bit, retest the 20 EMA here and there, come back to like the 480s or so, then try bouncing, but eventually, right? A very tiny retracement for it to continue pushing, but eventually it's going to push up to 500 plus, maybe even higher levels than that. But for now, we're just going to be watching 500. It may retrace just a tiny bit more and start pushing higher and higher and higher. And I think 500 is coming once again for Nvidia. We have a nice accumulation structure. I think the odds greatly favor 500 very soon, ultimately. So could it cool off a little bit first? Sure. But ultimately, 500 should be on the table. Finally, I think I went over the majority of stocks out there. But for Tesla, just as a reminder, watch the range that's in for now and see if we could get that breakout. It's going to happen eventually. I think Tesla's going to be looking for 260 plus eventually. It could start off a little low, you kind of like range trade for a bit, but eventually I see it breaking out to 260 as time progresses over the next day or so. And ultimately, I think the bulls have a bigger edge for now. So just don't forget that the daily candles are looking bullish on the dollar. I'm sorry, on Apple and SPY, they're looking bearish on the dollar. The dollar looks very bearish right now. If you look at the daily chart on it, this is a bullish signal for the markets. The dollar got a bearish cross on the MACD. Because the dollar is bearish looking, the market is going to be bullish because of that. And then for the VIX, same thing. It's also looking quite bearish on the daily chart. If it keeps breaking down, the market's going to continue to push up, which is causing the VIX to drop like that. All right, so these signals are all aligning right now that the market likely has more upside eventually. And I do believe the bulls have the edge as we approach Apple's big event. With that said, I thank you all so much for listening. Have an absolutely spectacular rest of the day. Remain calm, cool, and collected, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thank you, and peace out.